Once upon a time, in a very tall castle on a very round hill, there was a treasury. And inside that treasury, behind a very big door, with a very big lock, were the most important things in all the kingdom. The cookies. Hundreds of them. Chocolate chip, snickerdoodle, oatmeal raisin, and at least 47 that were just shaped like stars. Someone had to guard them. And that someone was Ember. Ember was a dragon. A real, proper, fire-breathing dragon, except the fire part was still coming in, and the breathing part mostly came out as warm minty air, which smelled lovely but was not very scary. She was roughly the size of a teacup. A large teacup, she would tell you, if you asked. Please don't call her small. She prefers concentrated. The king had given Ember very clear instructions. Guard the cookies. Let no one in. Roar at anyone who tries. Ember had practiced her roar all morning in the mirror. It sounded, she thought, extremely fierce. It sounded, the mirror thought, like a kitten sneezing. But Ember was ready. She stood at the door, wings straight, tail curled, badge polished. She was a guardian. This was her moment. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the first visitor arrived. It was a mouse. A very small, very round mouse named Gerald, who was wearing a little scarf and carrying an even littler basket. Gerald looked at Ember. Ember looked at Gerald. Ember took a deep breath and roared her most fearsome roar. Gerald said, "Bless you." And then he sneezed too, just to be polite. Serious, now, this was the moment. This was where Ember was supposed to say, "No entry. These cookies are protected by the crown." But Gerald looked cold. And his little basket was empty. And he had such a very small scarf. Ember looked at the cookies. She looked at Gerald. She looked at the cookies again. And then she said, and she would later describe this as a tactical decision. "Would you like a napkin with that?" Gerald got 2 cookies, a napkin, and a very small cup of tea that Ember had been keeping warm under her wing, which, honestly, was the most useful thing her wings had done all week. He sat on a little stone step and ate happily. Ember stood guard. Gerald waved at her between bites. She waved back. This was, she decided, going extremely well. By 11 o'clock, the second visitor arrived. This one was bigger. Much bigger. It was a cat, a large orange cat named Duchess, who moved very slowly and looked at everything like she already owned it. Duchess had heard there were cookies. Duchess always heard when there were cookies. Ember puffed up to her full height, which brought her roughly to the level of Duchess's kneecap, and said her most official words, "Halt. Who goes there?" Curious, Duchess looked down. Very far down. She said, "Is that a lizard?" Ember said, "I am a dragon." Duchess said, and then she sat down, which is what cats do when they've already decided they've won. Now, Ember knew she should roar. She knew she should stand firm. But Duchess had been walking a very long time, and she looked tired, and Ember had been raised to be kind to guests, which was, she was beginning to realize, a bit of a problem for a guard. Ember gave Duchess 3 cookies, a cushion she found near the door, and a very warm look that said, "You are welcome here and also please don't eat me." Duchess ate the cookies. She kept the cushion. She did not eat Ember, which Ember counted as a victory. Gerald and Duchess nodded at each other from their respective spots on the castle steps. It was, by any measure, a lovely morning. The cookies were significantly fewer, but the steps were significantly cozier. Excited, and then, at noon exactly, the gate opened wide, and in came the whole Meadow Picnic Club. There was a rabbit with a checkered blanket, a hedgehog with a thermos, 2 very enthusiastic squirrels, a frog who had brought his own chair, and a very old tortoise who said he'd been walking here since Tuesday. They had heard, through Gerald, through Duchess, that this was the place to be. Ember stared. They stared back. Someone waved. Ember waved back. She couldn't help it. The Meadow Picnic Club spread their blanket right there in the castle courtyard. The hedgehog poured tea for everyone. The squirrels arranged the cookies on a little plate. They were very particular about presentation, which Ember respected. The frog sat in his chair and said this was the finest establishment he'd visited all year. The tortoise said he agreed, and that he planned to come back next Tuesday, which meant he should probably leave now. Ember did not roar. Not even once. That evening, the king came to check on his treasury. He walked through the gate. He crossed the courtyard, carefully, because the frog's chair was still there. He opened the big door with the big lock. He looked at the shelf where the cookies had been. There were 4 left. 4 cookies. And a very nice arrangement of wildflowers that the rabbit had left as a thank you. The king turned around very slowly. Ember was standing behind him, badge still polished, tail wagging slightly. "Ember," said the king, in a very careful voice, "what happened to the cookies?" Ember stood up straight. She explained, in great detail, about Gerald and his empty basket and his cold little scarf. She explained about Duchess and the long walk and the cushion. She explained about the picnic club and the frog's chair and the tortoise who was probably still in the driveway. The king listened to all of it. He was quiet for a very long time. And then he said, "You gave away the entire treasury." Ember said, "Everyone had a lovely time." Whispers, here's the thing about Ember, though. She wasn't bad at her job because she was weak or silly or forgot the rules. She was just built for a different job entirely, one that nobody had thought to give her yet. Some creatures are made for guarding. And some creatures are made for welcoming. And the world, it turns out, needs quite a lot of both. The king sat down on the step. Gerald stepped, and ate one of the 4 remaining cookies. He thought about this for a while. The next morning, a new sign appeared above the castle gate. It said, "Ember's Tea Room. All welcome." The treasury got a proper lock and a proper guard, a very large, very serious badger named Reginald, who had never once offered anyone a napkin in his life and was extremely proud of this. And Ember got a little round table, a kettle that fit perfectly under her wing, and more visitors than she could count, which was fine, because she was better at welcoming than counting anyway. Gerald came every Tuesday. Duchess came whenever she felt like it, which was most days. The picnic club booked the courtyard for their monthly meetings, and the frog brought 2 chairs now, one for himself and one for the tortoise, who was always just arriving. Ember made tea, and passed cookies, and sometimes, when the evening was just right, she practiced her roar, and everyone cheered, because it was their favorite sound in the whole kingdom, even if it did smell faintly of mint. And the lesson, if you're looking for one, and it's okay if you're not, some stories are just nice, is that being good at the wrong job doesn't mean you're bad at everything. It might just mean you haven't found your right job yet. Ember wasn't a bad guard. She was a wonderful host. And sometimes the best thing you can do is find the place where your kindness fits just right. Even if that place is a very small tea room in a very large castle, run by a dragon the size of a teacup. A large teacup. She'd like you to remember that. The end. If you loved Ember's story, there's another one waiting for you, about a penguin who was absolutely convinced he was a giraffe, and a very tall tree that changed everything. It's right here, and it's just as cozy. See you there.